mistake. He goes back upstairs, and that is when he would realise there's no mistake. He comes downstairs, studies the two downstairs walls. He will then get a hammer and his trusty torch and knock a couple of bricks from that downstairs wall just to see why there's this 2.5 foot difference. He sees a secret cavity. On illuminating in that cavity, he will see this actual motorbike in this original condition, except at that stage it was covered up in a dust sheet, covered in dust and muck. The apartment owner knows that anything that's in his apartment, it belongs to him, so he has no fear about knocking the whole wall down. On dragging the bike out, he realises he's got a motorbike he's never heard of. It must have some value, so he chooses to go to the expert of motorcycling in North Palima Street, very close to Wrigley's Field. That is the local Yamaha dealer. He explains he's just found a motorbike in the wall. Now the Yamaha dealer will be intrigued by the story. On coming down, he would realise not only had he never heard of a bike called a Trout, but more importantly, he'd never seen an engine quite like this. He starts to suspect that this could be a missing link, a link between the motor bicycle with pedals and a motorbike with a kickstart. So he goes into a negotiation, pointing out that the bike has got no headlight, no tail light, and of course at that stage covered in dust and muck, tyres are delaminated, the bike is unfit and unsafe to be used on the road. But he, as a responsible Yamaha dealer, he was willing to swap a brand new bike for this. Now, as you can imagine, the apartment owner, he weren't particularly interested in motorbikes, and all he's got now is a terrible mess, a brick wall down, and a bike unfit and unsafe for the road. He would actually take that swap and end up with a brand new 350 Yamaha. Now the Yamaha dealer will take this down, clean the bike off, put it in his front window with a little plaque pointing out where the bike was found. Over the next 8 to 10 years, the bike will be eventually taken out the front window, new tyres will be fitted on it, and they would actually get the bike running. It would be in the late 1970s when a gentleman called Bud Eakin will buy this bike sight unseen. Now, if you've ever watched the telly in the last 50 years or so, you definitely would have seen some of Bud Eakin's work, but do you know who he is? No. Bud Eakin is a Triumph dealer from California. His close personal friend, his riding companion, definitely his best customer, was a gentleman called Steve McQueen. You may be aware that in 1961 Steve McQueen makes a film called The Great Escape. It would be Bud Eakin who's invited to go over to Germany and would double for Steve McQueen. You will be aware that Captain Schultz, Steve McQueen, would capture that Triumph motorcycle, and he was being chased by the German army, who's actually Steve McQueen in a German uniform. And he would eventually culminate that chase by the famous jump over the barbed wire fence, where Bud Eakin will jump for his good friend Steve McQueen. Now, it wasn't that Steve couldn't do the jump, it was because he couldn't get insured to do the jump. For the self-same reason, you'll see Bud Eakin driving that green Mustang in the chase scene in Bullet. Steve McQueen couldn't get insured. Now, Bud Eakin is in Chicago making a film called The Blues Brothers. He hears about the motorbike that was found in the wall. He rings his good friend up, and he and Steve McQueen go into Torillo Taxi's Yamaha dealership. That is where Bud Eakin will buy this bike sight unseen. We don't know if it doesn't take the backing of his good friend Steve McQueen, because by now the price has started to escalate, but more important, this would actually end up in Steve McQueen's collection until he passes away in 1980. Now, Bud Eakin and Steve McQueen were both historians, but more importantly, they were historians as well as caretakers of American history. So we don't believe anything other than putting air in the tyres, fuel in the tank, oil in the engine was done by them. Now, they would choose to call in the proper historians. Come and see this bike that was found in the wall and give us your opinion. The historians would go through this bike with a fine-tooth comb. Within a short period of time, they would realise every single piece of this bike, with the exception of 5 individual parts, all the other major parts have been designed, manufactured, machined, put together and made running by Mr. Traub. The 5 exceptions. Now, these parts were the only parts that Mr. Traub used his own wages to buy these parts, and because of the seat, the carburettor, the magneto and the 2 wheel rims, the historians have put a year of manufacture of 1916 on this motorbike. Now, in 1916 or thereabouts, Mr. Traub has built possibly the world's earliest 80 cubic inch, 3-speed transmission, kickstart operated bike. But more important, this bike is 21 years ahead of Harley Davidson's 80 cubic inch, light years ahead of Indian. The American male psyche of a bigger, better, faster bike. If this had gone into production in 1916 as opposed to hidden in the wall, it probably would have sold like hotcakes, putting Harley Davidson and Indian out of business during the Depression. Google this bike, I will guarantee it will come up as the world's rarest motorcycle. But all we honestly know, it was found in a wall in Chicago. Now, is there any questions?